Working Cows Podcast, episode 194.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, powered by the Global Ag Network, here with another episode for you guys. Really excited to be joined today by Austin Troyer. Austin is a first-generation rancher just getting started out in Ohio. And so Ohio, as we'll talk about, is an I state, essentially. It's got an I in its name anyways. And so there are some really highly inflated land values there due to the influence of row crop agriculture and some of those things. And so getting started out in that environment, Austin's been thinking outside the box and using some outside the box species, practices, and leasing tactics. And so we're going to talk to him about leasing reclaimed mine land, strip mined coal mine land that is being reclaimed, and he's leasing that. And we're going to talk to him about the ins and outs of that and some of the other things that go into being a first-generation rancher just getting started out. So, Austin, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I always appreciate the opportunity to talk to guys east of the 100th meridian, and you're quite a ways east of that in Ohio. So can you tell me about kind of the history of the landscape that you guys are on, and the history of kind of, ranching or even the current state of ranching in Ohio as you see it?
Yeah. It's one of those things that for us, we've kind of had to go out and start doing things different. The traditional way here is buy a piece of ground and try to pay for it with livestock, but land is just appreciating so fast in this area that it's going way beyond the value of that you can obtain from it with livestock. So for us, that's just been leasing ground. So we don't own any ground. Well, we own a house and a couple acres here to live on, but we don't farm any ground that we own. Everything is leased, and it's some rough country. It's been strip mined for coal. Some of it's been mined for limestone, and it's kind of the ground that nobody else wants. We got a lot of like river bottoms that there is all row crops, and then the upper stuff, the higher country is what used to be timber. It had coal underneath of it, and so they take the timber off, get the coal out, and then when they reclaimed it, it was all just basically, some guys call it junk ground. It has very little soil, but it just ends up being a wide open field with very little topsoil. But it does grow enough grass, to support some cows, and we can lease it for pretty cheap compared to, the good row crop ground. And nobody else really seems to utilize it in this area. So it's kind of made an opportunity for us.
So is there's quite a bit of row crop farming in Ohio then?
Yeah, the western half of the state is basically all row crops. It's super flat. Flat as a paper. And the eastern side, you get into some big rolling hills and a lot of hardwoods, timber. And in fact, most of the state, I would say, is just big timber. And if it wasn't for the strip mine, the area that we're in would just be nothing but timber. But because of the way they mined it, it's transitioned it to stuff that we can get some grass growth on and raise some livestock on.
Yeah. So when I was just out of Bible school, some friends and I jumped in a car, drove 26 hours straight through to Pennsylvania for a wedding. And it was kind of about Ohio, where this prairie kid started to get a little claustrophobic with all the trees, almost in some places on the interstate felt like I was driving through a tunnel of trees. And
certainly different than out west for sure.
Yeah. And so a lot of those areas back when they were taking the coal out, just the trees got flattened. And then when they put it back, it got put back into some grass, kind of introduced species of grass.
Yeah, it depends how they mined it, and depending, how deep the coal was. If it was super deep, they would a lot of times dig a pit and then auger the coal out, which is why we have some high walls and such left on the farm. Other places, if the coal wasn't too deep, they would just take all the cover off, get the coal out. And the issue with the way they reclaimed it is they would move the topsoil pile so many times. By the time it got put back into place, there wasn't much of topsoil left. So some of it's pretty rough, and it's you can't put a shovel on the ground in the summertime. But other parts are decent, and it can it grows quite a bit of tonnage, and it does good for us.
And what are you? How long have you been doing this? Kind of going out and getting the leased land and bringing livestock onto it.
I worked for a couple big ranches in the state since I graduated high school, and learned a lot from them, and kind of took their model, except they owned the ground, and I just took basically what they were doing and just did it on my own, leasing ground. And this is our third year doing it. So we're still pretty new at it. We're still learning a ton as we go. We've made a lot of mistakes, and hopefully are making some good decisions now. And especially the last year, we've learned a ton about just how to make it a business and make it economically stable for us.
Sure. So those ranches you worked for before, they were taking some of that junk ground, so to speak, or that reclaimed land. That's kind of what they were focusing on.
Yeah, the one is probably the largest ranch in the state. They own roughly 30,000 acres, and it was a really neat operation. They had a whole bunch of cows, and they were just a cow-calf operation, but probably 80% of what they had was strip mined as well. So I was really familiar with it, kind of knew what I was getting into, and learned a lot from them. And going out and looking for leases, kind of had a little bit of background of what that ground would produce, how many cows you can run on it, stuff like that.
Sure. And so is your business model to acquire leases and then put your own cattle that you own on it, or are you guys doing some custom grazing, or what's kind of your business model?
It's a great question, and one that we're working through right now. We're finding out, like, this time of year, this is the beginning of June, we just have a ton of extra grass. And then, come the winter time, we don't have any equipment to feed hay. So we don't feed any hay. We just basically stock our livestock at our winter stocking rate. We just go through on stockpiled fescue, basically. But I think there's some downsides to that, because in the summertime, we're not maximizing the growth that we have. We're stocking for our winter rate. So I think the business model for us in the future is going to be something custom in the summertime, whether that's custom cows or custom stockers or something like that, just during the growing season to kind of utilize that extra growth. And then, as far as the stuff that we own, we're kind of transitioning from a cow-calf operation more towards a sheep enterprise. We just found that they fit some of our rough country a lot better. There's a lot of invasive species here, Russian olive or autumn olive. We have really bad, and the sheep eat quite a bit of it. And things like Cerisa lespedeza, they do a lot better than the cows do. And we have some really steep country as well. It's a long way to water, and it's pretty hard on our cows. They don't utilize it real well, and our sheep just love those steep hillsides. So we're finding that they're a better fit for us. And so kind of keeping a big group of ewes around all year, and then something custom in the summertime is kind of what we're going towards in the future.
Yeah, so I've heard it said, if you can hay it, you should graze it with cows. If you can't, you should look at sheep or goats. And so is that kind of what you're seeing as a holds true in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, absolutely. I've never heard that, but I couldn't agree more. That's the sheep they just fit so much better than the cows here. I swore I never owned a sheep 5 years ago, but now I just, the more I get into them, the more I like them. They become my favorite part of the farm now.
Yep. Just on the last episode that just came out, episode 193 with Greg Christensen, we were talking about integrating goats into an operation. And so you guys are you have been running an operation of cattle that you own, and then now you're transitioning more to an emphasis on sheep that you own. And so how has that transition been? What have you learned kind of in the process of marketing, purchasing and selling and some of those things?
There's been a ton of opportunities, I think, that I never knew about in the past. Just things like, stock or lambs. I never even really thought about, that would work really well for us to utilize our extra grass in the summertime. And the transition from cows to sheep we're still working through that. And we're selling some cow calf pairs, to kind of fund buying some more sheep. And we're kind of using the cows right now because they are here. We're kind of liquidating them as we need cash flow, and as we need, I guess, the finances to buy and expand the sheep operation. So they're here and they're paid for, and they're making some money for us. We're not losing money on our cows. So we're just trying to figure out the best way to get to, I guess, grow and scale our sheep operation while we still keep the cows and kind of, I guess, supplement the income until we get to where we want to go with the sheep.
What do you think is the future of your operation, in the next 3 to 5 years? Will it be only sheep with some custom sheep? Will it be sheep and custom cows? What are you thinking right now?
I think that's if I had to answer it right now, I would say it would be we own the sheep and a small group of cows, because we really do enjoy the cows. And they're, especially my wife and my son, they love the cows, and we enjoy calving, and we just really enjoy having them around. So I don't want to get rid of the cows. But from a business point of view, I think the ultimate would be for us to just own the sheep and then do custom cows in the summertime. But one of your past episodes, I think it was Logan Probino. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce his last name or not, but I remember him saying that he's just in the livestock business, and any class of livestock that he can find and add value to, that's what he does. And I thought that was really good. And that kind of opened my eyes a little bit, and just the opportunities that are out there. And I say we're in the sheep and the cattle business, but at the same time, if there's another enterprise that fits us, I think we'd be willing to change and go to that. So,
yeah, very good. No, I appreciate the open-mindedness, and I suppose that comes along with being a first-generation rancher. What are some of the advantages that you've seen in that regard?
There's definitely some advantages. There's being a first generation guy, it definitely has its disadvantages as well. It's hard starting from scratch, and you don't inherit anything, but you also don't have a set of paradigms ahead of you that you have to follow. And there's not a older generation there that's telling you, this is the way we got to do it, and we've always done it this way, and we can't change it. Or maybe we have this really good genetic breeding line that we like that we don't want to liquidate because we're attached to it. There's a lot of things that I think get in the way sometimes, and that I've seen just talking to other ranchers, that coming into ranching with a fresh slate and nothing, ahead of me. There's really nothing holding you back to change. And I think there's definitely an advantage there.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that no ingrained ways of doing things and things like that are really a good thing. What are some of the disadvantages, or what have you found a network of people in your area that you can draw from their experience, or are you guys kind of so far outside the box that there's nobody really around that you feel like you can help draw from, or how's that been?
Yeah, most everybody here kind of has the same business model and the same ideas and are doing the same thing. They all own their cows. They all start feeding hay way too early in the year and feed hay for 6 months, and then, keep their cows till they're ready to die, or they're going to, sell them as call cows. So there's not much buying and selling. And, we definitely are way different from that. The biggest resource that we've had has just been the Ranching for Profit group and the Executive Link. I joined Executive Link this year and have an awesome board, and being able to just send an email out to those people and bounce ideas off of them and stuff like that's been great. And just the network, when we go to EL, we meet, I meet in Billings, and there's, 50 ranches represented there. And there's just a room full of cowboy hats and good people that want to help you and have the same ideas and are in the same business as you, but they're on your team. So it's really, really neat. That networking has been priceless for us.
Yeah, that's another, illustration of the value of Executive Link is, you got a guy from Ohio running on reclaimed mining land with sheep and some cows. And I'm sure you've got guys from, of just as much varied background, as you are. So it's just such a unique opportunity to get in a room and talk with people who are doing things way differently, but you can all learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Executive Link's been awesome. I'm super glad we joined, and we have a summer meeting this year in Great Falls, Montana, and I can't wait to go out there and do it. And it's a highlight of the year for sure.
Yeah. So tell me about the process of getting these leased pieces of land. I mean, how is that? How are those relationships? Is there a private landowner that you're dealing with on those pieces? Are there how many landlords do you have? Some of those things.
Yeah, we have one big landlord. It's an old mining company.
Okay,
and we've built a relationship with them. I called them probably 20 times in the last 5 years, just trying to get a hold of them. And I finally did and had a chance to meet them. And I would say probably 70% of our ground comes from that one company. And we've got a great relationship with them. They're awesome to work with. They really understand soil health and they place value on it. So for us to go out and be able to do what we're doing and keep their ground from just sitting empty and getting mature and actually, build some soil, they understand that. And that's probably the hardest thing is when we've been looking to lease ground, people, they see the traditional ranches around here that, a lot of places look like a golf course all year. And then it's just a mud pit because they're feeding hay. And so we kind of have some challenges as far as what people have in their head that we're going to do to their property. But we probably have 25 landowners, I would say. Some are just small, 10, 20 acre pieces. But we have quite a few that we lease just to add water to different fields. So we kind of just go around and make farms as big as we can. And I think we have 3 farms now. They don't connect. They're all independent, but we've been able to put a big enough land base together there to make it worthwhile doing. So I use Onyx a ton, Onyx Maps, and it's how I guess I find my landowners. And I had a guy ask me the other day, how do I get so many leases and what's the key to doing it? And for me, it's just been being persistent. Like I have several landowners now that the first time I asked them, they said no. I asked them to lease their property, told them what I was going to do, and they just, instantly said no. Well, the next year I went back and knocked on their door again and said, hey, I know you said no last year, but just want to know if you'd reconsider. And I've done that several times now, and it's been amazing. Even if it's year 3 or year 4, asking people every single year has really proven to show that you're persistent. You're here. You're here to stay. You really want to do this. And I've had quite a few landowners after a couple of years. I want to say give in and agree to a lease. So yeah, it certainly takes some work, and that's probably the riskiest part of our business. It is all leased. So the big company that we lease most of our land from, if they decide to sell it. Or even some of the smaller landowners, if they decide to sell it or not lease it to us, it kind of puts us in a bad spot, but we understand that going into it and we know we've got to be flexible. And we have some other pieces of ground, across the state that we have in mind that, if the good Lord's willing, we won't ever have to move over there. But if we do lose a lease, we kind of have a backup plan. I guess there's some other area that we can do the same thing in. So yeah, leasing certainly has its challenges, but as far as a first generation guy trying to get into it, I don't think there's much of a better way.
Have you had to do any educating of landlords, do you think, on the front end, to talk them into it? Or, like with the mining company, you said they were in on the soil health conversation. Were they looking that direction before you started talking to them, or has there been a process of kind of teaching them these critters are going to make that land better, or anything like that with the landlord?
Yeah, it's certainly a learning process. We've almost got to the point where we put a video together just to what we're doing with pictures and just, showing us moving cows and showing how we rotate. But there's certainly a learning process. Or I should say, there's certainly a teaching process where we got to show people, hey, look, we're going to keep our cows in one group and they're only going to be here maybe 3 or 4 weeks out of the entire year. And we're going to come in, we're going to hit it, and we're going to move. So stuff like that, it's kind of a foreign concept to a lot of people. And just showing them that, and a lot of times I just show them pictures on my phone and what we do. I've had a couple landowners that we have actually taken in my truck and driven over to our existing farms and say, hey, look, here's our cows. This is what the grass looks like. We just moved out of this field. Look how much grass is left. We don't trample it. We don't make it muddy. Or at least we try not to. We're certainly not perfect. We get 40 inches of rain. So we certainly deal with mud, but educating the landowners has been a really big deal.
What about the mining company? Were they on board before you got there? Was there a process of convincing them, or you said you called them a lot, but was that just trying to get a hold of an actual person, get a call returned, or how did that process work?
I'm very fortunate with them. I called a bunch just to try to get a return phone call, and once I did, they weren't their goal wasn't soil health, but once I kind of explained a little bit about what we're doing and just how we're going to manage their ground and try to keep the brush back and using sheep and stuff like that, they were all for it. And they kind of dove in with both feet with me and just agreed to do it. And we're actually working with them right now on some water development stuff that we can, some above ground pipelines and stuff like that. And a couple of different wells where we can really get some good animal impact. And that company has just been great. The owner, he's in his 70s. And when he was a kid, he had livestock, and it's almost for him, it's like looking back at his childhood. He comes out all the time and drives around. He's got a Jeep. He comes and drives through the farm and loves to see the cows and always calls me when I'm going to move them. And he wants to just come watch. And so building that relationship has been awesome. I've been very blessed that they're a great company to be associated with and work with.
How about the sheep? Has there been a process of getting them out on land from an infrastructure standpoint, fencing and those things, or how are you guys managing them? That was my biggest fear and my biggest, paradigm was how we're going to keep these sheep in a fence. And we've really learned that keeping sheep content was the key. And we're getting away with 2 wires for our perimeter fences. There's a couple spots where we're using 1 wire, but we're moving them with poly wire, which is 1 wire about 18, 20 inches off the ground. And if you pressure it, they will get out. But we've got enough ground that as long as we keep them moving and keep them, in some really good grass, we're just not having a whole lot of problems with them staying in. So that was my biggest fear, and it's been pretty easy to overcome just with some training through electric, and then really just keeping the sheep content. That was definitely our biggest, I guess, the biggest thing stopping us from getting into the sheep, and it really hasn't been a big deal nearly as much as we had thought it was going to be. Sure. How are you guys managing the relationship between the cows and the sheep? Are they in different places? You mentioned having quite a few different landowners trying to get pieces put together contiguously. Do you have some places that are more fitted for sheep and some that are more fitted for cows, and they aren't in the same place at the same time, or how is that working for you guys?
Our home farm here where our house is, it's by far the brushiest farm. So that's where we have the sheep. And we've actually tried putting our cows and our sheep together, and that's kind of the ultimate for us. But our guard dogs don't like cows. I'll just put it that way. Mm-hmm. We had our dogs, and I don't want to correct the dogs for it because they think they were just protecting the sheep, but they would chase our cows until they were running through a fence. So eventually I think that's a goal we're going to work towards, is being able to put our cows and our sheep together. But for right now, we just picked our brushiest farm, and coincidentally, it's our steepest farm. So it was the best fit for the sheep. And then our other 2 farms right now are just cows. But we're working on, getting those stocked with sheep. Hopefully by next year, we'll have enough of a scale on our sheep enterprise to be able to stock some of those. And the third one, it's about an hour from our house. It's a little bit further than I would like to go check, just checking dogs and checking sheep. So it's probably going to stay cows for a couple of years until we really need it for the sheep. So yeah, there's kind of we just kind of, follow wherever we have grass, that's where the cows stay in the wintertime and the sheep just kind of follow the brush and there's not really a good rhyme or reason because we're kind of understocked right now. Just kind of wherever they go right now is the home farm, I guess, is where we're keeping the sheep. So
it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, right. We're very fortunate.
You've got the 3 different farms. Those cows are at that farm year round, and the sheep are on the home farm year round. I mean, of course, rotating and moving regularly, but that's where they stay. There isn't a lot of pickup and trailer back and forth over here, over there kind of things, given the number of landlords you've got and those things.
Yeah. In the past, as we've been setting all this up and building the fence, we have actually done a lot of trailering around just to keep cows in grass. Like the 3rd farm we actually picked up 2 years ago. We just saw we were going to be way short of grass. And that fall went and fenced a couple thousand acres and ended up taking all of our cows down there and wintering them on that farm, then hauling them back in the spring. It wasn't exactly ideal, but it was better than having to buy and feed hay. So now we still kind of use our 3rd farm as our cow winter farm. Our 2 home farms here, one has a sheep and a small group of cows, and those cows are just here for the growing season to help the sheep keep this stuff knocked down. And then as soon as it starts getting dry in August, September, we haul those cows out and then just leave the sheep here for the wintertime. And then our 2nd farm here is where we have our big group of cows, and they stay there for most of the year. And then it just depends on what the fall looks like. If we get a bunch of rain in August and September, they can stay there all year. If they don't, we'll haul them down to our 3rd farm as well. Or maybe, try to pick up another lease to get them through the winter as well. So that's kind of been our approach is we kind of gauge where we're at in the fall. And we're very fortunate that if we do need more grass there, I have a couple pieces of ground in mind that we can go fence to get us through winter. It's kind of been our insurance policy, I guess you could say, for not having a tractor or not having any hay.
What is the sheep model? Is it, are they hair sheep?
Yes.
And yeah. And then how are you, what have been some of the challenges that you guys have been trying to work through? I mean, you mentioned that keeping them content, if you're not pushing them, they'll stay in pretty well. What are some of the challenges that you guys have encountered with the sheep that as you've gotten into them and started to scale up?
Yeah. The only wreck we've really had is we had a couple of rams get in early last year. So we had some winter babies that we weren't planning for. So I would say the biggest obstacle has really just been keeping rams around. The model that we're working towards right now, and I don't know if anybody listens to this that would have some feedback. I would love to hear it, but we're contemplating lambing our ewes in May on pasture, and then just pulling all our ram lambs out and not castrating any of them, just keeping them all intact. And then in the fall, December 1st, we put our rams in. So we would run a separate group of ram lambs from about August 1st through December. And then December 1st, we would kind of pick through the rams. Anything that's not, fit for breeding, we would pull out and sell. But the rest of them, we would just put our entire ram crop back over our ewes for 30 to 60 days, whatever our breeding window is going to be. And then after that, we can pull those out and sell them. And that would eliminate the need for us to keep rams the rest of the year. Because it's one of those, keeping rams has been one of those things I can't wrap my head around it, because we got to have a guard dog with them. And then we have to take that farm or that field out of a rotation. We got to keep the ewes far away from it. And there's just not a productive class of livestock there. It's just some rams that are sitting there all year when you really only need them for a couple weeks out of the year. So we're trying to work through that right now. I'm not quite sure if that's the great idea or not. I'm too new to the sheep business to really know. I've talked to quite a few people about it and got a little bit of positive and a little bit of negative feedback on it. So I'm not quite sure, if that's a good idea or not. But I think for us, we're going to try. I think we can capture enough value in not having a group of rams around all year that if there is a little bit of downside to it, with line breeding a sheep that we can overcome it.
Yeah, maybe there's an opportunity for the Justin Rader 100th Meridian Ranching, his bull leasing. Maybe there's an opportunity there for the ram leasing. I don't know.
Yeah. We've actually talked about that with a couple producers that we really like their genetics, just renting rams from them as well, just, renting them for 60 days and then returning them. So yeah, the rams just irk me. I can't stand having them for 12 months when you only need them for 2.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, you're not alone in that. In any livestock, I think that they're definitely a pain to have around those breeding males. So, what do you think is the key to your success in ranching, or what has helped you to keep going, keep doing well, keep advancing, keep moving forward?
I'm not sure I could say one thing. It's taken a while. I think being patient and waiting for the right opportunity, as far as the right ground. We were waiting it took us about 10 years to find the right lease for us. And we were willing to move anywhere. I would have gone anywhere, even out of the state, if I had the right opportunity. So being patient and knowing that it takes time to build, a ranch, and we're certainly not there yet, but I think being able to understand a bad opportunity is just as good as being able to see a good opportunity. So waiting for the right place and then the right time, and then really building relationships with your landlords. And that's the kind of the name of the game when it comes to leasing. If you don't have, if you got bad relationships, it's kind of it's a risky place to be. So I think that, and just being persistent and knowing that it does take time. And then probably the biggest thing in the last couple of years has just been the networking that we've had, talking to like-minded people, running ideas past them, just getting a group of peers that you can bounce ideas off of, and you can use them, like I'm only one person, and there's not very many producers in this area who think like I do and want to try to do things the way I'm doing them. So just finding a group of people that are doing that, even if they're across the country, having people to talk to and really, I guess, just network with, even if it just does nothing but give you confidence in what you do. That was kind of what EL has been for me. The last meeting we had, there wasn't any crazy breakthroughs for me there, but just laying out my ideas in front of people and having them say, "Hey, you're not crazy. And, this is working." And it looks, you can do it on paper and it looks good, but there's still some doubt in my mind because I don't see anybody else around here doing it. So just having that group and network that you can, really talk to has been really valuable as well.
Is there room for other people to do what you're doing in your neck of the woods or in other areas of the country that you're aware of? Kind of that, especially grazing, reclaimed mining land. I know that in the East, there's a lot more of that strip mine coal that went on. Is there more room? Could you expand you said already that you're understocked. So could you expand and do this on more land if you wanted to, or could somebody else come in and do what you're doing on other pieces of land that you're aware of?
The selfish part of me wants to say no, and I don't want anybody moving to Ohio. But no, there is. It's getting harder and harder. There's some bigger ranches that are really buying up a lot of this ground. Gas and oil has hit pretty hard in this area in the last couple of years, and it's given the big landowners a lot of extra money. So the price of land has literally doubled or tripled in the last 5 years here. So it's a lot of the strip mine ground is being bought up from the coal companies. And it's just slowly disappearing, I guess. But there is still some out there. There's a couple big state leases in this area that are really good opportunities that they go out for bid every 5 years for lease, and they're I don't know what the current bid is, but I know they're really cheap. So there's a couple other pieces of state ground that they're not doing anything with. That we've looked at trying to work with some state officers there and try to get some sheep or cows on that ground as well. So I don't want to say there's it's booming with opportunity in Ohio. It's certainly not easy, but there is, and I don't think Ohio's any better than any other state right now. I think we're in a good area here with the strip mine, but I think every state has its own opportunities in their own ways. I think I know a lot of guys that get caught up on they don't want to move. And I've got some friends that live in some, we call it Amish country, Holmes County, Ohio. And it's some really, really fertile soil. It's all crop ground, and they want to try to raise livestock there. And it's just the wrong area. Ground selling for $30,000 an acre. And it's just, you can't pencil that with livestock. So, trying to find leases, you got to go to wherever the leases are. You can't necessarily make them fit, right where in your hometown where you want to stay. So yeah, there's definitely opportunity, just a matter of, I guess, where, and if you look hard enough and long enough, I think it's out there.
One of the evidences of talking too much is that I don't remember if I'm the one who said something or not, but I remember at one time in a conversation with somebody about Ohio, and I said, well, there's an I in Ohio, so it kind of ends up being like an I state, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, with those high land prices and some of those things. It can be a challenging thing if you are married to a certain geography and say, and I want to ranch here. That can be a kind of a hard one to overcome. Now, are livestock the best thing for that ground if they're managed well? Of course, we all understand that, but you've got to overcome the economic realities before you can make something like that happen.
Yeah, it's like the price of land has just gone so far above what you can produce on it that buying ground is becoming harder and harder. And that's my dream, is to own enough of a ranch one day that I can hand it to my kid. But we're a long ways from there. So
sure. Earlier, you mentioned Cerisa lespedeza as that has been mentioned in different forums that I've seen and talked about as a frightening thing that can encroach pretty quickly and some of those things. So, what's your experience been with that?
I would say it's not all negative. It does take over like crazy. It does have a negative side, but our sheep also love it. And it has a natural wormer, some level of natural wormer for them. It's kind of the same thing with the autumn olive bush. I used to just cuss those bushes and I hated them. The cows didn't do anything with them. You couldn't get cows to come out of them. But the longer I go with the sheep, the more I realize that there's some benefits to them. Just having some random bushes out in our field, gives us shade. And the Cerisa lespedeza the same way. It is a bunch of extra feed. It's kind of a tall, skinny plant, and so it's not all negative with them. I guess just trying to find the right class of livestock to utilize it I guess that's what I would say was the key to those.
So, what does a piece of mining land look like before you get there? Usually,
it's usually the stuff that we just fenced. It's been sitting empty for 20 years. It's basically just fescue, some really mature, really rank, really mature fescue. And that's what we're taking our cows through winter on. I like to start a lease in January 1st. So if we can lease it in the wintertime, we have all of last year's growth on it. That's been really nice and really helpful. But it's just sitting empty. Most of the hilltops are wooded and the bottoms are where your fields are. I guess it depends how deep the coal was, but we do have to build all our own fence. So that's where we've been using some fiberglass posts and doing a lot of it by hand. It's not necessarily the most fun thing, but we can build a lot of fiberglass we can build a lot of fence with fiberglass posts really cheap. And we can do it by hand because, again, we don't have a tractor to put posts in and stuff like that. So we kind of, when we get to a piece of property and it's just sitting there, we first thing we got to do is look for our water. And that's, basically determines how many fields we're going to have. We try to divide up all the water sources and, get as many different paddocks as we can. So I guess the first thing we do is just get a perimeter up so we can start using it and then kind of develop it as time goes on.
Is it running water? Is it dam water? What kind of water do you guys usually have?
A little bit of both. We've got a lot of ponds, a lot of creeks. We do have quite a bit of springs. The springs can be hit or miss because of the mine. It kind of messed up the water table. So there's a lot of sulfur, there's a lot of iron in it. So some of those run really good, but they're not very good water. So we kind of just use whatever we have.
Do you pump any water like out of surface ponds or out of the creeks or any of that?
Right now we don't. That's what we're working on with our landowners. We are going to try and catch one really good spring and then use that to pump water to a pretty big section. A lot of times the water's like just the nature of the way they mined it and reclaimed it, all the water's in the very bottoms. So we have a lot of lift to get water up and over, even just the first closest hill, 400 or 500 feet before you can reach the top, which I know that's not a lot for, it's certainly not a mountain, but when you start looking at the economics of that and the size of the pipe and getting power in there to run a big pump, it's pretty tough in a lot of the places. So we're kind of leaning towards wells right now. And even a lot of the ponds, just because of the way they were typically sediment ponds for when they reclaimed everything, they put these catch ponds in. So they're typically really shallow, 3 or 4 feet deep. So there's not a really good, I guess, water source for us other than drilling a well, with the exception of a couple springs.
Sure. And so you get your perimeter up. Is that high tensile wire, like a single high tensile wire, or what do you guys have to put in for a perimeter?
We're doing 2 wires for the cows and the sheep. If I can rent a post tractor and a post driver, we're using wooden posts and we're putting our posts about 90 feet apart and just stretching 2 wires. And then if we have to, we can go back and put a couple fiberglass posts in by hand if we have any problems with the sheep. And then all our interior fences or I shouldn't say all, most of them are one strand. And it just depends on the fence and how important it is, I guess. One strand is a little bit tricky because it's hard to make it short enough that the sheep will stay in and high enough that the cows won't jump over it. So you almost have to do 2 strand if you're going to run cows and sheep there.
Yeah. And so are all those what I would call semi-permanent, which is fiberglass posts and high tensile wire? Is that your interior fences are all that as well?
Yeah.
And then are you doing some paddock subdivisions with poly?
We are, and that's what we're working on now. Once we get water in place, we can really do a lot more. I would say we're trying to get our paddock size down to about 100 acres a field. Right now we've got some really big fields. We've got a 600-acre field only because it has one little pond in the corner and it's our only water source. So it's not real economical to divide that up with poly because you spend half your day rolling and unrolling poly wire. And I tried it the first year I was here. I was building lanes, get cows back to water, and I was just wearing myself out. It was working, but it wasn't sustainable. I was spending way too much time on just the poly wire, and the benefits weren't worth it. So once we get some more permanent water and better infrastructure, then we'll really do some management intensive grazing and our goal is to get to the point where we can move whatever class of livestock it is every day. That's our goal. But right now we're probably on about weekly moves on average during the growing season, just with the infrastructure we have.
What have been some of the lessons that you've learned? I'll give you an example. Like last year, I was going out and I was building paddocks about probably 120 to 180 feet wide and about a quarter of a mile long. And the cows would be in there for 2 days, and then I'd go out and do it again. And then this year, I'm building them about 600 feet wide, and I'm strip grazing away from the water, moving them every 1 or 2 days. So I think that's I don't know, that seems to be a lot better use of my time. So any lessons like that you've learned? We've talked a little bit about leasing, about developing those relationships, maintaining those relationships. Any other lessons that you've learned through these last couple of years of getting more and more involved in kind of your own operation?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just whatever you do, making it fit your lifestyle. Before, when we first started here, like I said, I was setting up tons of polywire, and I was driving an hour here every day, setting up, half a mile of polywire to build a lane, and then coming back and moving it. And it was just wearing myself out. And it was hard on not only me and the cows, but just my marriage. And I have a 18-month-old son. That stuff's way more important than a perfect graze. So I'm the kind of guy that's like, I want to go tackle the world and I want to go do it all, but just slowing down a little bit and making sure that everything else is still in line. And it is a sustainable lifestyle, not overworking yourself and just really enjoying it while you're doing it, enjoying the process. I can work myself into the ground and it's all worth nothing, if we don't have the wife and the kid there with us. So just making it an enjoyable experience and understanding it's going to take time. It's been the biggest things for me.
What about recommendations for somebody? Say you encounter some guy at a ranching conference and he says, I'm a blank slate, I'll move anywhere. What are some of the tips that you would give him? What are some of the places you would encourage him to look and some of those things? I'll move anywhere, I'll run any class of livestock. What are some of the things you would say to him or her? Okay.
Yeah. I think I don't necessarily have like a specific state I would send him to. I would just look for underutilized ground. Like I know there's some ground in the Midwest that is just covered in Sericea lespedeza. And a lot of cattle producers are getting out of there because it's just the cattle don't utilize it. But if someone wanted to utilize goats there, it'd be a great opportunity. Just opportunities like that where land's underutilized. I know like Southern Missouri, Northern Arkansas, there's a lot of rainfall. It's a really good area, really relatively low land prices. I'm not sure about the leases. That's just an area that comes to mind. But anywhere here in the East, I can drive around here, in one day and look at a dozen farms that I would, potentially could go lease. And I don't think it's just, here in Ohio. I think there's opportunity out there and just, people being persistent and diving in and trying to do it. I think, if you're persistent enough time and put in the time, it will come together.
Have you talked to anybody having success with moving Sericea lespedeza encroachment backwards, or is that even a good goal? I mean, should you just find a class of livestock that thrives on it and see what happens, or what is your experience?
I don't have enough of it here that I'm really trying to take it backwards. I'm more or less just trying to, I guess, keep it where it's at and utilize it. I did talk to a couple of ranchers in Kansas that they were up to like 3,500 goats. They started as a cow-calf operation, went to a sheep operation, and now are running Spanish goats. And I don't want to say that they're taking it backwards, but they're like you said, they're utilizing it with the proper class of livestock.
Any resources or anything that you would recommend? You mentioned Ranching for Profit, Executive Link, things like that. What else would you recommend?
Those two would be by far the biggest ones for me. But just reading, I've never been a good reader, but just audiobooks. I've got a library of 50 books now that every time I talk to somebody and they recommend a book, just write it down and buy it and read it. There's so much information in what people have written, and you don't have to go to college and spend 4 years and pay a bunch of money to do it. I know I couldn't afford it at the time, and there's enough information out there now. You can learn from other farmers, and probably the other place to learn is just through other people. There's been some really cool people that I've met through EL and they're not even on my board, but just different connections. And I went and visited them and just spent the day. Hey, let's drive around. Can I come help you? We drove around. I was at a place in West Virginia for 8 hours one day, just talking and just the value from learning from their mistakes and seeing what they're doing. That's been priceless for us.
We kind of didn't even touch on the direct marketing aspect of your business. How was 2020?
Oh man, it was crazy. COVID was just kind of all over the place for us. I wish I could have seen it coming. We didn't have enough inventory to keep up. So now we're trying to change all that. And it kind of led us to the point where we decided to build a direct market. My wife started a company. It's called Farm and Table. And we've got a shipping department here where we take our animals, we do beef, pork, and lamb, and take them to a processor, and they do custom processing for us. We get it back. We have a walk-in freezer here, and then we can ship our cuts anywhere in the country with dry ice. And it's been good. We've learned a lot. We've made some dumb mistakes. And we're still trying to figure it out. There's things like free shipping that everybody expects you to do now because of Amazon does it. Things like that are a little bit of a challenge when it comes to shipping meat. So we're working through that, but the retail markets are nice because it's a stable market. It's a market you can control and you can work directly with a customer. So you kind of eliminate all the middlemen, and it gives you a little bit of stability from the commodity markets. And that was been a big problem for us. We got into the cattle business in 2012, and then when markets were fairly low, and then 2014, 15, were awesome for us. And we kind of got used to that. And then they dropped, and, you take a big pay cut, and you're working harder than you ever have. And it's frustrating. So all of that. And then, here comes COVID. So that kind of led us to, hey, let's just dive into the retail thing. So we're still trying to work through that as well. It kind of goes back to the lifestyle thing. It's just my wife and I here, and we do have a farm manager that just started working for us. But my wife's, she does most of the stuff with our kid, and then has to run the business full time and do customer service. So we're still trying to figure out, how does this fit our lifestyle there as well? But we're learning every day, and I guess taking it one step at a time.
Very good. Any other major pieces that you wanted to cover today?
I don't think so.
Sure.
Not that I can think of. I appreciate you having me on here. I know I've gone back and listened to, I don't know how many podcasts, and just the amount of information and the value in those that you can get, and it's all for free. So I really appreciate you doing this and hosting it. I really, really enjoyed it.
Well, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been great for me. A lot of things I've been able to see work on my own ranch. It's just stuff that I've learned through hosting it. So it's been a really good opportunity for me as well. So appreciate your time today, Austin. Thanks for joining me. Where should we send people to check out more about what you're doing, or maybe get in touch with you if they've got questions or ideas, or if they've got ideas about how to manage those ram lambs, where should we send them?
We're not big on social media. We do have a website. It's crossroadslandandlivestock.com. And we do more on Instagram than anything else. It's the same thing. It's just Crossroads Land and Livestock. You can find us on there, and my name and email and phone number are all on our website.
Sure. There will be links to that in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/194. So workingcows.net/194 is a show notes page for today. And there will be links to the Crossroads Land and Livestock.com, as well as the Instagram. And you can go on there and get in touch with Austin. So Austin, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Clay.
Good stuff there with Austin. Not quite sure where we're going next week, possibly continuing to push farther east of the 100th meridian. We'll see. I will let you know, but I encourage you in the meantime to subscribe and make sure you're getting every episode when it is released in whatever podcast catcher you use. There is a link at workingcows.net/subscribe to the different platforms on which you can subscribe. So make sure you're checking that out, and we will see you again real soon with another episode of the Working Cows Podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.